Hitler cherished the bloody legacy of Charlemagne, leader of the First Reich. The crown jewels of Charlemagne were an inspiration to Hitler as he carried out the Holocaust. Learn how Europe today is reviving the violent spirit of Charlemagne. Next, on The Key of David with Gerald Flurry.
Greetings, everyone. Europe is once again mesmerized by the crown of Charlemagne and the crown jewels. And this is the way Hitler really made a lot of history there about those crown jewels. Why does Germany look upon the crown jewels so intensely? Why does it mean so much to them? It is something sacred to them. Why is that? What is the reason for that? Otto von Habsburg recently died. He was in Parliament there in Germany for a while. Mr. Otto von Habsburg, a descendant of the Habsburg dynasty that ruled the Holy Roman Empire for 400 years, talked about a crown in a museum in Vienna, Austria, which symbolizes a great deal to the Germans. Why does this mean so much to the Germans? The crown jewels of Charlemagne. Why does it mean so much to them, these crown jewels? Why does it symbolize something to the Germans that it doesn't to most other nations at all? In fact, it's mostly unconcerned by other nations. But they should not be blind to what is going on here, because it is something that is very deadly if you look at what happens with that history that Germany has there. What does it all mean? Here's what Otto von Habsburg said: "We possess a European symbol which belongs to all nations of Europe equally. This is the crown of the Holy Roman Empire, which embodies the tradition of Charlemagne." They always want the crown jewels. Hitler was passionate to get those, and he took them and then took them to Germany because to him they were so sacred. Mr. Habsburg talks about the Holy Roman Empire, but he doesn't say that being embodied with the tradition of Mussolini and Hitler. When he's talking about it, he goes back to Charlemagne. He wants everybody to know about the jewels, those crown jewels of Charlemagne. When Hitler was in Austria, he believed that God had replaced the Jews, what everybody believed about them, and then the Germans felt, well, this responsibility came on their shoulders, that they were the chosen people of God. Then in 1938, at a rally in Nuremberg, Hitler had brought from Vienna, after 140 years, the insignia of the First Reich, the imperial crown, the orb of empire, the scepter, and the imperial sword. At the presentation of these symbols of imperialism, he solemnly vowed that they would remain in Nuremberg forever. That's from John Toland. They're going to stay in Nuremberg forever. That's what Hitler said, and nobody was going to take them from him, at least at that point. The crown jewels were to be a key part of the Third Reich as they were of the First Reich, which was Charlemagne. And the Third Reich was Adolf Hitler. We need to be aware of this history. And I wanted to read something to you that I talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago and just add something to it. But you probably remember that President Clinton received this Charlemagne Prize. I attended and was able to see that. But here's somebody else that received that International Charlemagne Prize. May 8, 1997, 28 years ago, here's what Dr. Herzog said, because he too received that prize, International Charlemagne Prize. They like the word international. Here's what it says: "For 1,000 years, the destiny of our continent has revolved round the choice between a cohesive or a fragmented Europe. Charlemagne, after whom our prize is named, made his own particular choice. Well, he likes that. The first unification of Europe. And he liked the way he did it. At such an hour, the truth must be told. Notice this. At such an hour, the truth must be told. Only by wading through a sea of blood, sweat, and tears did he reach his goal to unite Europe. He was saying this in 1997, 28 years ago. And he's saying this and sort of bragging about it. And Hitler caused the death of 60 million people. And he's sort of bragging about the Charlemagne history. This is something that is about to rise up again, and those 10 kings over there, it'll be pared down. Europe will be pared down to 10 nations. And it could happen in a tiny few months or tiny few years, but it's going to happen very soon. But here is a president that is sort of boasting about that. And it says at the same time that he had to walk through a sea of blood to unify Europe. Now, that is not the way to unify a country or nations, but this is what happened here, and they're still talking about it, and talking about it in a positive way today, without telling you some of the worst part of it. But just think about this. World War II, we had 60 million people put to death. Think about that. That this, what they're talking about and what they want, just caused the death of 60 million people when Adolf Hitler was one of the heads of the Holy Roman Empire, the sixth one. And that is something we all should be concerned about. European Union leaders, they're working to recreate the empire of Charlemagne, but most of them were not going to like what is going to happen there. But there were two leaders, one from France and one from Germany, just in 1978, and they were there in Aachen where Charlemagne was buried. And they were talking about monetary problems, and they said, well, maybe the spirit of Charlemagne brooded over us, one of them said. Just so focused on Charlemagne and the crown jewels that is today back in Austria, in Vienna. Soon the world's going to know about this modern Charlemagne. He's going to come on the scene as that strong man in Europe, and that's mentioned in Daniel 8 in verse 23. And then if you go on to verse 25, Jesus Christ is going to come and conquer that Holy Roman Empire and a lot more armies until the blood is up to the bridles of horses in the Jehoshaphat Valley. That's how bad it's going to be for 200 miles long. But let me just mention a little bit about the crown jewels that we're talking about today. This is my subject. I want to talk to you about the crown jewels of Charlemagne. The Third Reich crown jewels, Hitler claimed ownership of the orb, which is a sign of the whole world. They think about taking over the whole world. That's what they've thought of in the past, at least the whole world of Europe and more if they can. That was their empire, and the imperial crown and the imperial sword besides the orb. So here are the crown jewels of Charlemagne. Here they are, and it's a key part of the Third Reich, or was, just as it was the First Reich by Charlemagne. Hitler loved Charlemagne and wanted to imitate him in every way possible. And he waded through a sea of blood to unify Europe. And that's what Hitler did, at least for a few years. Here, you see, you have Hitler just being fiercely loyal to these crown jewels of Charlemagne. And Hitler said one of his most inspired speeches at the frenzied torch-lit meetings in Nuremberg, where the crown jewels were, that's where he's going to be. And they're going to be in Nuremberg forever, he said, forever. This was sacred to him. And it's becoming more and more sacred to other nations in Europe today. And as I said, they're just mesmerized by these crown jewels of Charlemagne. We need to understand that history, and most people in the world don't even think about it, but it is coming to this world in a violent, just walking through a sea of blood. That is a prophecy in your Bible, and that's exactly what is going to happen. It's going to be repeated, only this time it'll be far worse. That's what Bible prophecy tells us. Hitler, when he was growing up in Vienna, his early years in Vienna were absolutely crucial to his career, because at that time I formed an image of the world and a view of life which became the foundation for my actions. I have had to change nothing. Now, that was like in 1910, according to Robert Waite, and he said that was the greatest change in his life. And he never changed anything from that time forward as far as his great goal to really conquer the world. That was in his mind. And he just about did it, but not quite. Here he was in Vienna, thinking that he and the Germans had taken what was credited to the Jews by a lot of people. He felt like, well, this all was coming, and God is giving this power to Germany, and this goal to Germany. That empire meant so much to him. Notice what happens in 1938. At a rally in Nuremberg, Hitler had brought from Vienna, after 140 years, the insignia of the First Reich: the imperial crown, the orb of empire, the scepter, and the imperial sword. At the presentation of these symbols of imperialism, he suddenly vowed that they would remain there in Nuremberg forever, according to John Toland. Forever. We need to get that in our minds. Why could this inspire and encourage Hitler so much? Why were they so sacred to him? Well, he learned a lot in Vienna, and even it got, as he was growing up, and even by 17 years old, or the age of 17, he even believed he was the Messiah of the people as a 17-year-old teen. And he was very much influenced by a great evil Satan, the devil. And you can see that very easily if you just study a little bit of this history. But he said something clicked in the Pacewalk Hospital. There he had the most decisive decision of his life. He had to answer the voices that told him to conquer Germany and lead them into the Holy Roman Empire. That was his goal. Here's what he said. He insisted that his early years in Vienna were absolutely crucial to his career. He goes on to say in Mein Kampf, "This was the time in which the greatest change I was ever to experience took place in me. From a feeble man, I had turned into a fanatical anti-Semite." He hated the Jews. The voice came to him and commanded him to go and save Germany as he looked at it. Commanded him to do it, and look what he did. This pitiful man. But he had a powerful Satan, the devil, behind him. the God of this world. That's the problem. That is something that was very, very important. And Winston Churchill thought that he actually made these decisions about what he was going to do in Germany in 1919. He said it happened then, but not in Vienna, but in Munich. That's what Winston Churchill said, but that's not true. Hitler said that he got all of this from Vienna, Austria, in about 1910. If you look at these crown jewels of Charlemagne in Vienna, Hitler said that his political ideology was in Vienna. Why? Because of those crown jewels of Charlemagne. He was there and he became inspired and moved by them in a way that it's hard to imagine. How can that be so important to him? Well, he knew that he had power behind him, and he was going to go to Munich later and have this fierce passion in Germany. And this man took over control of Germany in just a few years. And he brought with him the crown jewels of Charlemagne. And you're going to see that people are going to become more and more excited about those sacred jewels. The crown jewels of Charlemagne have this severe passion extremely coming into their minds today. And they're talking about it a lot more, and we'd better take note because it's going to shock the world just like Hitler did in World War II. And think about 60 million people were killed by that. 60 million. And the next round is going to be more than that by far. You can read about it in our book on the United States and Britain and prophecy. But again, see, the European community does not know, but they're already living by the heritage of the Holy Roman Empire, according to Otto von Habsburg. The great majority already are living that way, but they just don't know it. Remember, Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill said this in a document: "It is our inflexible purpose to destroy German militarism and Nazism and to ensure Germany will never again be able to disturb the peace of the world." Never again. We're going to stop it and not ever let that happen again. And how many people are thinking about that today? Germany is arming themselves like never before, and they're going to have nuclear bombs, and it's going to become a strong leadership by a modern Charlemagne, by a modern leader like that, and his greatest power will be deceit, how he can deceive people, and then, well, talk very nice to them, but then conquer them when they think they have peace with him. Well, this is coming very, very soon, and we have to know that if we're going to be prepared for it, because it's coming whether we know it or not. It certainly is coming. Konrad Adenauer, the German leader after World War II, said if you did arm Germany again, it would be taking a calculated risk. He knew it, and they did it anyhow, but it was a bad risk. You're going to see that in Bible prophecy. And then after about 2 years, they were supposed to denazify the Germans, and Brian Connell said you can see that they only denazified the Germans for 2 years, and then they turned it over to the Germans. And it was a farce. That's how foolish we are in our history and our thinking, and we'd better begin to look to God and not look to men. This is about millions and millions of people dying in this horrible world, and it could be stopped if we look to our God. We need to understand all this. Daniel 11 says this man is going to come into office. This great, strong man of Europe is going to come into office by flatteries. It's not by votes, by flatteries. Daniel 11 tells you that. We have to learn to be ready for this. Let me read to you just a couple of scriptures here in the end of this. Revelation 17 in verse 10. Notice what it says. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is. Well, that's when Herbert Armstrong was on the scene, and he told us all about Germany and what was going to happen. And that 6th one did come on the scene just like he told everybody. And then he went on to say, the other is not yet come, but now it's coming before us. The last one is coming before us. And if we don't hear God's word, we're going to become victims of a great violent Europe by 10 kings. So you can go on to see in verse 12, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. The Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. That could be you if you yield yourself to God. It probably could happen to, well, many people for sure. But think about this. Think about this. All of it's leading into the second coming of Jesus Christ. Look at the ending of all this. These very people that are rising up in Europe are going to be slaughtered themselves by Jesus Christ when he comes to this earth. And it's going to come when these people are doing their violent deeds. God is about to bring peace to this world and rule it with a rod of iron and bring them peace and joy and all kinds of happiness. Until next week, this is Gerald Flurry. Goodbye, friends.
All our literature is available free of charge at no cost or obligation to you. Request Germany and the Holy Roman Empire and He Was Right. Order now. The preceding program was a paid presentation of The Key of David, brought to you by the Philadelphia Church of God.